Let me say a few words before we start. First of all, thank you for being here today, Christian and Michael. We talked about having a regular broadcast with Michael on our channel now. We will also try to make the whole thing live in the future so that viewers can ask questions in the live chat. And Christian already told us that if he got time, he wants to join us too someday. Anyway, Dustin and I are very happy that you are willing to do this, Michael. That's very nice of you. So thank you again.
Love it. Thank you.
And a few words from my side before we start. I think I've made it clear in previous conversations that I'm very interested in this topic, the topic around Billy Meyer. But it doesn't mean that I necessarily mean that I believe in everything, and I'm rather skeptical. I have my own beliefs when it comes to the UFO topic or aliens or spiritual stuff, and they differ from Billy's, but that's okay, I guess. But as I said, that does not mean that I'm not open to the matter and I don't reject anything. I do not judge. I do not ridicule anyone for what he is interested in and for what he believes in and stands for. And I certainly hope that in return I will not be condemned or judged for my skepticism. Now that we have that out of the way, there's a few things that I'm interested in. I have read that young Billy Meyer is said to have made over 100 trips back and forth in time when he was just a kid. He's said to have met Buddha, Mozart, Leonardo da Vinci, and many others. My question would be, what exactly was the reason for this time travel? Were these time travels very important, or were these time travels for pleasure?
He was a boy. He was very interested in historical events. First, it was his interest as a boy to visit. Of course, he was not always a boy when he made these time travels, because during his youth, he spent much time in another time dimension where he learned, and therefore he was not for instance, his 7 years or 8 years age was somehow expanded, so to say. So on one hand, it was his interest as a boy or as a teenager to visit these people because he studied the teachings of these people. For instance, Siddhartha Gautama or so, these persons. And then he was also, it was important that he visited the past. So he had first-hand knowledge about what has happened in the past in order to be able later, when the mission would officially start, to know what is real and what is not real. When he went down to below the sea level to see all kinds of fish that we don't know yet that these exist, and so this was for fun, of course, and this was also a kind of a balance regarding all the bad and cruel occurrences that he had to monitor or to see, so his psyche could have kind of a rest.
It was important for his process.
Was important for his mission, for the coming mission.
Michael, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I think that, this to me is obviously fascinating material. And Christian said something, and you said something in the introduction that I thought was also important, where you said, I don't necessarily believe this, and I have my own beliefs. And there's no criticism. It's to point out that also young Edward Albert Meyer had been raised in an environment that had some religiosity to it in the community. Yes, Christian? I mean, he had, even though Father Zimmerman was a very highly conscious person, and he had a religious role in the community. So anybody and everybody, the way it appears to me, and I didn't have the benefit, obviously, of firsthand on this, but it appears to me that what Christiane has just said is important, and it would be important to people who are approaching this, learning about the Billy Meier case, that they would understand that we are leaving an age. We are leaving the age of beliefs as such. Some people call it the Piscean age or whatever. And we're entering the age of truth and knowledge, factual truth, where we learn and we see things as they are, and we learn about things as they actually are and or were. So this amazing experience that Billy Meier has had throughout his life gave him the opportunity, as Christiane said, also to to have a respite from some of the harsh realities of the cruelty of the world, the cruelty directed towards him, and to be educated in. And this isn't, we don't need to believe this. This is, we'll just say, okay, so it said this occurred, and he gets to see things as they really were. Now, in your process and in the process of many other people who come to this material, we, and all of us, we come with certain beliefs about how things are or should be, and our beliefs are based on things that we have previously learned or accepted or had been taught to us as true. And so we will see things through those filters, through that lens. And that is true of people that have had any kind of religious background and have religious beliefs or strong philosophical, political beliefs. We see things through these filters. And one of the things that's so amazing to me in reading, learning about Billy's life and how he recounts the true histories of things as he has seen them, as the Play Aaron have spoken about them, we get to at least consider that many things are not as stated, as presented as truth, and so that there is another possible explanation or history or reality for things. If nothing else, we're not told here ever to take any of this on as a belief that we say, oh, well, I know for sure Billy Meier did these things. I read it, and so it's true. Because every religion, you could say Western or Judeo-Christian and other religions are based on a premise. And that premise is what's in, let's say here, I'll just grab it, but what's in this book is true because this book says it's true. That's not how truth works. It's not how we learn what is factual. That isn't how science works. So all of us that are drawn to this material, that are interested in this topic and this particular body of information and evidence, we are getting so much input that is very different than what our religions, what our history, what our politics has taught us, told us, said we should believe and accept, that it can be a bumpy ride. And we can treasure that, because as we come to determine what we accept, finally determine through our thinking and reasoning, this is true, this makes the sense, the logic, it follows, and oh yes, now I'm seeing that certain discoveries have been made that corroborate what Billy Meier said about this, what he said about that. So the only other thing to add to that long piece is that starting in the 1980s, I shifted my attention from the UFO part of it, for the most part, to the information that pertained to scientific discoveries, to events that were foretold. And I call that the higher standard of proof. We can, have all sorts of fantastic UFO photos and films, and they can be analyzed and authenticated, but that won't solve it for everybody. Somebody else can always say, I still don't accept it. I don't believe it. But there's a thing called a copyright. And the copyright is a legal standard of proof that something was published at this time, on this date. And in the case of my own shifting of focus, it was that I opened a newspaper in 1988 that had information about A-bomb testing being tied to the ozone damage from a big, important laboratory in California called Lawrence Livermore Laboratories. And it also had percentages of damage that they had determined now were directly connected to atomic radiation. As I began to read that, I almost immediately said, why do I already know this? I reached under my bed where I had the 100-page blocks of the earliest English translations from the German of Billy's contact reports, in which Semyaze, I think it was even in 1975, is beginning to tell him about the ozone damage connected to the atomic testing. She would suggest the name of a scientist, Michael McElroy, maybe from Harvard, that he should contact. In subsequent articles, Daniel, I would see a new discovery connected to what has happened when they have now found that the ozone holes are letting in more UV that are destroying microorganisms in the atmosphere and in the earth and waters, all these things. And I would go, oh, that's here. This is all here. So this started for me a shift in focus and a rereading of contact reports to see where do they have information about these different things, because it's so fascinating. Then I would find that Billy, we could prove to a legal standard through copyright that Billy published the information specific, not generalized things that like Nostradamus would say, but specific things that he published verifiably before anybody, before any official discoveries. That, for me, changed the whole thing. And other people have come forward, starting in the 90s, to help. Oh, I found this. Oh, I found that. Oh, this has just happened. This volcano erupted and just where he said. So that's why, as fascinating as the UFO stuff is, and of course, tales of Billy Meier traveling in time and meeting these people, you have something that's a legal standard that's accepted in a court of law. And I want to just tell you one more thing. And I'm sorry, you got me on a question here that I feel is so important. So I'll just say this as quickly as I can. I was in Las Vegas several years ago at a MUFON event of all things. I had a table, they'd given me a table, and I had books and films and things, and a man comes by, an older man, arms across, he's shaking his head like this, and he's very energetically, very captivating. I said, can I help you? And he said to me, I'm very interested in the UFO topic, but this Billy Meier case, this has got to be a hoax. I said to him, well, sir, what do you do? What's your occupation? He said, well, I'm retired. I'm a retired judge. He leans in, judge. And I said, well, Your Honor, can I step in your courtroom for a minute? Because I thought maybe we can lighten this up a little bit. And he said, and he was great because he right away got it. It's like, I want to talk to him on the level of, his standards in his occupation. He understands certain things, and I want to talk to him about it. Okay, he's going to give me a shot at it. So I said, Your Honor, if I say to you that a friend in Switzerland published information about the reason that the surface of the planet Mercury is contracting before NASA supposedly discovered it, would I have to prove that to you? And I said it deliberately. And he said, well, of course you'd have to prove it. So again, I had a book on the table, and I opened it up, and I said to him, Your Honor, do you see this copyright date? And he goes, yes. And I said, okay, let me go here somewhere. And I knew in the book where this was. Fortunately, so it didn't take that much time. And I said to him, so when this man, Billy Meier, asks this alleged extraterrestrial woman, I've always wanted to know the reason for the contraction of the surface of the planet Mercury. And she said, well, that's not difficult. It's because of the metal core. And I said, Your Honor, since NASA said that that's the reason for the planet, I said, in your courtroom, who prevails, NASA or my friend in Switzerland? He said, you do. How much is the book? How much is the film? So in other words, all of this talk, UFOs and extraterrestrials, it's a big topic, but it's another approach that in an instant can settle the entire matter of the authenticity of this case. We have over 250 examples like that, error-free, no theories, no wrong answers, no guesses, nothing redacted, corrected, withdrawn. Always the first thing that is told that he publishes, it's correct. So that's a long-winded answer about the whole thing here.
Let's go back to the time travel topic. When it comes to the time travel, researchers have this theory and often talk about the butterfly effect. So if Billy Meyer really did meet these people, wouldn't that have changed history and world events significantly?
No, of course not. Because everything that has happened, if you travel, perhaps it's a general information. Actually, time traveling, I think, is the biggest obstacle for people, for many people that are confronted with the Billy Meyer case. Perhaps they extraterrestrial flying on Earth, traveling to Earth. That's could be true, but time travel is something with huge consequences. If you accept that time travel is possible, then a whole new world is opening. And to open the cage to this, even assume that this could be the case, then already a big step has been taken. But that time travel exists is proven 100% in the Billy Meyer case. With the list that Michael was just referring to, and I can give an example for this, another example, if you like to hear. In my book here, I'm asking, how big or great is the chance that I can name a certain event that's occurring, say, in 10 years in astronomy? Astronomers are detecting an object that is not known now in, say, 10 years from now, and they are calling it XY. How big is the chance that, and I tell today, they will find this object in 10 years and will name it XY. How great is the chance that I'm correct with such a guess? Actually, it's zero, because I have no influence. I have no influence what's happening around the Earth. I could say that President Putin is still alive in 10 years. The chance is rather, there is kind of a percentage of that this could be the case. But an object that is not yet has been detected, in my opinion, the chance is zero, or 99.99999, say so. But we have had this occurrence on the 17th of July, 1975. That's an extraterrestrial who is in contact, is discussing the Van Allen belt. That's a belt around in the solar system. And then they were talking about positive particles and everything. And then Ptah said, the other belt that you are addressing is actually not yet known, but will be detected in the coming time, and it will be called Kuiper belt. And then 5 years later, in 1980, a theory was postulated by Julio Angel Fernandez in 5 years later, that there is be another belt and should be another belt. And then in 19, and this was then in a computer simulation, was confirmed 1988. That's 13 years later in a computer simulation by Scott Tremaine. And then this was this belt, this newly detected belt, was called Kuiper belt. Actually, this is something that's actually impossible if there wouldn't be time travel, or if prophecies or predictions are possible. But this also includes time travel principle, because how could you foretell something that it's really not calculatable, that will become in the future? So this means actually the basic is that the future is has also happened, or is happening now, just as when we travel back, we are in the future of these people who are living in the back in the past, and this is really a big chunk to swallow, and it makes all kinds of stomach ailments. So
yeah. Thank you. Dustin, I'm taking all the space here. Do you have a question?
Oh no. Again, like, one of my favorite quotes from Billy, I think, too, Christian, I think you said too, is don't believe, think for yourself. And that's just a perfect quote for getting into the Billy Meyer subject. Like, you really do have to think outside the box, and you really have to dig deep and past all the other bullshit that other people put on there, online, trying to find out better information about Billy Meyer and the ETs that he's interacted with.
I want to, because this time travel thing is so interesting. People think that, they can now go back in time and change things. But my understanding, and Christian can explain more about this, is the only reason Billy could visit with Buddha or Emmanuel or anybody like that is because it actually did happen then. Mm-hmm. Somehow it happened then, not that they went and changed what happened and decided to, take a visit, drive the time machine down to this particular time period and come into the middle, which would change everything. If we could go back and simply randomly appear and do things, the whole story about, well, can you go back in time and kill Hitler? And Billy has made it clear you can't change the past. So this seems like some kind of a paradox. Well, wait a minute, how can you go back if you didn't change it? My understanding is it's because it did happen then. It may not be in our history, or we may at some point also find books that were written long ago, such as the situation with the rabbi in France, where and I think Christian can tell the story better. I'll just simply say this, that Billy did talk about a time travel trip that he made with Asket and another man, and they met with a French rabbi, a kind of mystical fellow there. And then somebody finds a book subsequent to all of that coming out. Somebody finds a book that had been written in which there is a mention of this situation, seemingly. Christian, do you remember it more specifically than that?
Yeah, Yechieli was a rabbi in the Middle Age in France, and the Russian guy that had the occasion or permission to go back in time. Of course, this going back in time had to be occurring technologically with devices and so. And then at that time, they visited this rabbi, and the Russian guy, he had with him ein Viehhüter, it's a device, an electrical device that you are using to electrify a fence around, for instance, sheep or so. And he used this around his tent in Jordan, when he was in Jordan, out in nature and so. And then he gave this device to Yechieli and explained to him how to use it. And he also gave him a flashlight with batteries. And so in those times they hadn't electricity in France. And then I guess Yechieli attached this thread from this device to the door.
Yeah, knocker.
And if someone held the
wire,
the door knob, and then he got a shock, and so he used these devices. And if we would know where this device would have been, it would have been decayed then, if it would have been buried.
That was another question of mine. I wanted to ask if Billy really met those people. Why didn't they mention him? I can guess it was a very intensive conversation with those people, with those characters. And yeah, one could imagine that they mentioned him.
There is only one person that we have a verbatim report, where, like in the country reports, where for instance, Emmanuel, that's the person who lived 2000 years ago in Palestine, where he went back there, and the disciples, Emmanuel's disciples, were on the side doing something else, and Billy was conversing with Emmanuel, and Emmanuel also knew about things of the future. And this is the only conversation that is available verbatim, and the other ones like Siddhartha or Immanuel Kant or Darwin. So these people were these conversations are not reported, because one is enough, I guess. So it's not important to have all these, but there is kind of a summary. Billy is for instance, explaining the outcome of these conversations, like in the case of Siddhartha, that it was hard to learn that the teaching or the philosophy of that he was lecturing when he went through the countryside would be falsified in the future, just as with Emmanuel. Emmanuel, he was very very sad to learn or to know that from his true teaching, a religion would result.
I have some thoughts on that, if I could.
Of course, Michael. Go on.
Okay. A few things. One, it could be, I don't know. I mean, I'm just now thinking beyond, since we don't have anything that satisfies that question tangibly other than what Christian has just said. It could be that these people, not everybody that Billy may have visited with, if he went back in time, would they have written everything? Now, Emmanuel had the scribe and Judas Iscariot, but maybe some things might have been written or communicated that were either discovered and then buried or destroyed, or there could have been conversations related where they spoke about meeting with somebody that could have been Billy and Asket, or Billy and Svath. But one of the questions I had about the whole thing with Siddhartha was that, since they did know, I assume, I mean, Billy and Svath know they're going to meet this person. Let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. They're meeting with him, and all these events have subsequently taken place. So then my question would be, well, why would they try to tell him that? Why would they know they can't change the future history, if you will. And what would the benefit be then at that time? Because if he's not going to change, if the future is going to fulfill as it did, does it help the person, Siddhartha? Does it help anything to say to him, look, this is going to go badly? So that, in this material, while I can personally accept a time travel idea for a number of reasons, but I also could say you have to question everything. You have to go, well, why this and why that? And would it make sense? Because I have found that by questioning in Billy's material, I've learned a lot more and where the answers are. But that's a question I'm glad that Christiana's here so I can say, well, why would he do that? Because the future unfolded as it did. They've come from that time for these events, knowing it. So is there an answer here?
I had another question. Like, I heard there's Native Americans from America that actually went to visit Billy Meyer over a legend of theirs. Could you maybe talk more about that if you know more about it?
Two chiefs were there for visiting him out of their own interest.
Mhm.
But most of the chiefs of the native Indians didn't visit Billy, so it's a personal thing.
Okay.
I guess, like not all the famous movie actresses did visit Billy, but just Shirley MacLaine out of her own interest. So it's nothing special.
Also, I understand that Billy did meet with some Native Americans in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's much more information about it, but Billy has been to Arizona. He didn't fly Swiss Air to get here either.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was also sitting on a sliding stone in the in the Death Valley, and so
Oh, really?
because he wanted to monitor this, and then he sat on this stone in this very, very heavy storm. It was cold, and he nearly was swished off of the stone. He would really hold himself, and so he could actually experience this. It's a rather rare occurrence, but it's occurring, of course.
My next question might hurt a little bit, but I'm sure you're taking it like champs. Lately, I read a lot in Figo groups on Facebook. And of course, I also read how many people, what people think about Billy Meyer, and they talk good about Billy Meyer. People write very positive about him, and they somehow somewhat praise him. And I know that Billy Meyer himself never claimed to be a savior or a guru of some kind. I know that. But I always come back to the thought, how is the whole thing different from a religion or a sect? We have an interesting man, and he's followed by many people. These people live according to his teachings. And yeah, this would be my question. How is this different from a sect or a cult or religion?
Well, I know Christian
You
has a lot.
you can begin, and I add some information.
Okay, because Christian has lived, many years in association with Billy and the people. So I'll come back to something I said before, because this is very important. It's very different. And in a way, we don't immediately grasp this difference. There are no beliefs. It's like, again, with the analogy of a book. If you want to learn how to grow vegetables, fix a car, learn electricity or computer, you get a textbook. It doesn't give you a myth. It doesn't tell you that you need to believe this thing. As a matter of fact, it could be very dangerous if somebody says this is a book on electricity, and if you just believe that if you put these wires around like this, everything will be fine, it's not going to work out very well for some people. So it has to be a factually testable teaching. You have to be able to follow this information. I don't mean follow necessarily believe it at all. You follow along, you see what the instruction is, what it tells you about a thing. Then you have to test it. You have to apply it. And while this isn't just a regular computer you're applying to, the computer within us, if you will, the consciousness and the physical organs for that, the brain, we are far more complex than computers, and we have the ability to think. We don't always use it, or we don't know what that means because we've taken on lots of beliefs and instructions, things we follow blindly. So we now have a teaching presented in dozens and dozens of Billy's books and articles and things, and they say this is something about the psyche or something about the consciousness, or about, they mention, German words, Gemüt, and all of this that doesn't exist in English, and we don't even know if this is true. What is it? So we have to test everything. If we test something, if we understand that there's a law of cause and effect, which is recognized in physics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and energy follows stuff. So if this is actually a teaching that incorporates, it is physics, it is beyond a philosophy, it's a testable thing, and we get the result in our own life, then we go, well, that turned out to be true. Let's look a little farther in page that follows, and let's start testing these things. So if people are all in a classroom and they study something like physics, you don't call it a cult. We don't call it a cult. We call it study. If there's a study where there's a focal group that is publishing this material and studying it themselves, it doesn't make it a cult. Now, let's be very specific. A cult has very, very specific parameters, definitions to it. You have an infallible leader who dictates what the cult is. To my understanding, and Christian is going to explain a lot more about how Figu works, Billy has one vote, and he has people argue with him. So that's not an infallible leader. But also cults, they solicit, they run around, they knock on your door, or they send you things to say, this is it, please join us, please send money, please this, please that, this is the truth, and and they come at you. Well, there's none of that from Figu. Nobody's ever knocked on your door or mine, and I'm part of an extended study group, passive member. So we look at that. You're not required to do it. You're not required to join. You can, but just in the same way that you can go to a university or a school of higher learning, let's say, and you pay something for the course. But with the Figu material, there's so much you just can read for free that requires no membership, no purchases of anything. And yet, of course, we have all these books that Billy's written, that Christian's written, that other people have contributed to the, of course, the information about the UFOs and all, but the spiritual teaching. People contribute articles about it. So it's meant to, in my opinion, to inspire self-responsibility, the core principle here, which eliminates following anybody. You can follow the work of somebody without getting attached to the personality. It's, as you said, it's Billy, it's not about him, even though it appears he's the messenger. You have the professor that steps forward in the classroom and he speaks. So should the students now transfer all of their attention and the importance to if he's a good professor, he gets his nod, but it's the material. So let me leave it with that, and Christian can explain far more about the reality, I'm sure, of the Figu.
Yeah, of course, I don't follow these various Facebook groups and so on in the internet because I don't have interest or time. But I know from experience that human beings who find the Billy Meyer case are very excited and are very enthusiastic. And many of these people had a religious upbringing. And the religious upbringing is a very, how to eine Hypothek, if you build a house and you have a mortgage, kind of a burden regarding unrestrained thinking, because there are so many belief systems strong working in one's head. And people who are praising Billy, who are fighting for him, or try to convince other human beings that Billy Meyer is the true teacher of our time, or is something special, didn't understand the teaching that we are presenting. Actually, we are Figu, Billy Meyer, as the teacher, as the person who has the capability and experience to teach all this. We are just like a library. We are presenting information, and it's each person's own decision to, this is interesting. This could be, and then I start reading. Oh, time travel. Oh, crazy. And then the shutdown is there, or they perhaps read some, actually a human being should be responsible for everything the person is thinking, and from thinking the feelings result, not vice versa, but the thoughts are evoking feelings, and neglected feelings may turn into emotions that are hard to deal with, and so on. And then think, yes, of course, it's a fact that thoughts are producing feelings, because we have the example of placebo and nocebo, which clearly demonstrates that there is a direct interaction from what you read, what you think, regarding the feeling. There must be something like this, and then you can follow the thread and dig deeper and deeper, and then you find, it makes sense. All these interactions between material consciousness, subconsciousness, the unconsciousness, which is not known to psychology. The unconsciousness that's before it's kind of a waiting secretary room before the chief's office, something like this. And so slowly you learn and read, and then think, in my everyday life, since I am aware that if there is trouble with another human being beside me, the outrage, the emotions and everything of the other person, that's not me, but I'm the one who is triggering my own feelings through my thinking. What Billy is writing is correct. So it's a step-for-step procedure. And the more you read, the more is congruent, is in line with everyday life, with one's own observations of human beings around, and especially the analyze of oneself. The more I got the certainty that this is real. I'm on a realistic way, because before I had all kinds of crazy. Now, of course, looking back, I had quite some esoteric episodes, so to say. And this is the problem: is you don't get the recipe with these books. You have to think. You reading gives no benefit. You have to study what you are reading, and that's the way I think it's sensible for me if I have to do the work, because I learned that with no efforts you don't get anything. This principle is throughout nature. A bird who is not searching for food will not survive. There are principles that cannot be changed, like cause and effect, and thinking and feeling is the cause and effect principle. It's in each human being's own freedom to learn, to study or not, or just believe. That's the freedom of a human being.
I agree with you. Without effort, you don't get anything. I agree with you.
Yeah, both of you guys had great answers.
Yeah, thank you for your honest answers.
Yeah, thank you.
People, since you mentioned consciousness and spirit and the psyche, people often talk about spirit and consciousness, and some people don't seem to understand what the difference is between the human spirit and the human psyche. What do you think about it? Maybe start with Michael.
Well, my basic understanding is we could think of the spirit as the battery, the energetic battery that sustains the life. And it's more than that as well in terms of, and I'm going to give my very basic understanding here because I know Christian knows more about this. He's studied the spiritual teaching, creation energy teaching more extensively than I have. So it is the part piece of the creation itself. This entire universe, and what we think of as the universe is not the whole thing. This entire, you will use the word universe, is the creation. It's the energy and consciousness that creates and sustains everything in itself, in this entire creation, in this entire universe. And it gives a part piece of itself. It creates, if you will. I kind of say it's kind of like a holographic piece, a little hologram of the entire creation in potential that is given to each human life form throughout the universe. There are different kinds of spirits that go for and the word has been changed around a bit, but I'll use it as spirit for the animal world, the creatures, the mammals, the insects, the flora and the fauna. All of this is, we're speaking about the human spirit, human creation energy part piece, and it contains the potential that through countless evolutions is going to one day re-merge with the overall creation. And this, in the human beings, we are, our spirit, if we want to call it the spirit that enlivens this current personality, is in itself not the conscious part, and it passes out of us upon death. It will reincarnate and animate another personality in the future. The psyche is more of as I understand it, and it's probably more than that because I haven't read all the German to understand. It's a plexus. It's a where the personality and emotions and nerves and all located and erroneously called the soul, because it's located primarily, although it spreads through the body, located around the solar plexus. And these are two very different types of things. And the psyche will, upon death, be gradually dissolving away, the personality and all these things. But the spirit, while it is assimilating everything from that current reincarnation and that personality, it will move into what's called the beyond, which is a kind of like an etheric space around this world where it is resting until it's time for the next reincarnation of the spirit in the evolutionary path of that spirit form in a new personality, whether it be male or female, whether it be this race or that will not have an actual direct connection as a personality to the previous incarnations. But there are aspects of this, again, Christian will explain better if he wants to, about the storage banks and how we are impulsed through. It's a very much more comprehensive, let's say, cosmology for the moment than anything in religions that say, well, you die, you're going to go to heaven, or you're going to be dipped in hot lead for eternity because you were bad. So I am just laying out a very cursory understanding that I turn it over to somebody that I know knows more about it than I do.
Yeah. Okay. In German, we were calling our teaching the Geisteslehre. The term Geist is translated as spirit into English. And in old languages, it was also spirit. So, but actually we have now moved further. Billy is now using, and we are using now, the correct term for this, what has been called spirit or Geist before, namely is die Schöpfungsenergie, that creation energy, because actually everything is energy. From the Big Bang of creation. Creation is the building where our universe is in it, much bigger than the universe and so on. That's a separate topic. And this creation energy has created part pieces or Teilstückchen, or very separate, like snowflakes. If you have winter, you have snowflakes and so on. These snowflake represents actually this creation energy form. We are calling its form, but a form, it doesn't have to do with material, but how would you say an entity, much smaller than the tip of a needle and so on. And this creation energy form is has very much power. Force is a force, and as Michael said, you can be understood as kind of a battery, and not just a battery, but all that gives volt, but also gives watt. If you have a circuit, you have both the volt, 250 volt, and then you have the force that's in ampere or in watt. So, and this creation energy form is enlivening the body. As soon as this tiny part piece is vanishing, the body is dying, is dead, actually. And this is one thing, and what you asked was the psyche. And the psyche is the combination of the material consciousness, of what we are thinking, plus the feeling and emotions. It has to do with the nerves. It's also electricity that is emanated and constantly produced by the body, and can only be, that's actually the brain. The brain is the source. And as the brain functions, it needs the electricity produced by the creation energy form, and of course also by the metabolism that we are eating, breathing, and so on. And as Michael said, there is kind of a concentration in the solar plexus here, where these nerves because the psyche is not entirely material. It also has a finer, it has finer aspects that are going into the dimension of where the creation energy form is existing, because there is a link. So you could say creation energy form for guys is the battery, and the psyche is thinking and feeling.
Before we come to my last question, my apologies to Dustin that I took over the interview today a little bit.
Oh, please, no.
But it was so interesting that I was fired up. Do you have any more questions, Dustin?
I had a few, but it just kind of slipped my mind after a while.
Oh, not a problem.
Yeah.
We're
going to have more talks in the future.
Yeah,
so.
And we're also at the end. So
yeah,
let's get to my last question. We are currently living a difficult time. The war is raging in the east, and in this country, people no longer know how to pay for electricity, for gasoline, for food. What would be your message to the people who are affected by this? How should they behave, and what can they do to continue to live their lives without fear?
They should remember next time, when there are elections, who were originating all this mess, which parties and which politicians were the crazy ones, the stupid ones, who invented and went like blind sheep into this sanction mode, and are really the originators of all this mess. It's not the Russians that the prices are going up. It's not the Russians. It's all these crazy morons and irresponsible politicians and all these crazy people in the offices everywhere in the Western world, especially, who have decided this warmongering and destructive measures. But there are not many parties in Germany, for instance, that you could elect. I know for one or two, perhaps two. So, but we are not into politics. I just say people should remember. But then there is a problem, because except Switzerland, there is no democracy all over the world. No country is a democracy, because people can only elect people. And then if these people are elected, these can do what they want. They can start the war. They can put up taxes to people and everything. And this is the problem. And so this is one part of the coin. The other one is to always take care of one's psyche, of one's thinking, to make the best of the situation, not to get into panic, to keep a cool mood, even if there are problems. The danger of starving in Germany is not very high. I think there are still some social Gegebenheiten, possibilities, that if you would have hunger, you get some soup or something like this if you really are searching for. But the most crucial point is not flowing with the stream, not believing everything, these crazy one-sided manipulations that are occurring, but not flowing with the stream, and not it's the same principle. Don't believe anything. Think for yourself, because there is plenty of information available where you can have a broader view than the one that the mainstream is presenting to you.
Yeah,
I would say this is that's what I'm doing.
agreed.
Well said.
Well said.
I'd like to throw in a couple things, because obviously that's a core of it, and as it applies in America. Unfortunately, my perception is that the majority, not all, but the majority of the American people have been made stupid through politics, and the religious beliefs don't help. We have a left and right in America. The right wing is primarily a Christian believing Republican body of people. The left wing tends to be far less religious. Their religion is politics, and the beliefs of the left wing, which have become irrational beyond any recognition, with the mutilation of children through so-called gender surgeries and all this stuff, that has now suddenly become a cause of this left democratic political point of view, and where this side of the political spectrum used to be the pro-peace people, they are now the warmongers. This is the war party now, is the Democrats. It's a historical flip-flop. When Christian was talking about how things have gone, in the contact reports, Billy, because he has access, he knows many things that we don't about our true history, and of course things that are in the history that most people don't get informed about. The true nature of this war, how the whole NATO and US encroachment upon Russia was set in motion through promise breaking back in, I believe, around starting in 1990-91. This has been an agenda of this country. It's foretold in the Hanok prophecies in 1987 that this country would be the one that would, under the guise of peaceful globalization and creating a worldwide police force, it would result in all of this disaster and war and domination, and that America and Russia would clash with tremendous force, using weapons that were certainly even at 1987 not known about or in development, and many other very specific things. This is one of the amazing ones. In these Hanok prophecies, they talk about the Russians will move their troops to Arkhangelsk, which I think is northern Siberia, in preparation for attacks against Scandinavia, mainly against Sweden and Finland and Norway in there too, of course. And that was unheard of in 1987 because of the neutrality of those countries. And it's just like suddenly this would seem to be so bizarre, except that, and this was published in English as early as either 2002, 2004, but in 2011, the Russians moved their troops to Arkhangelsk, where they are now. And this is supposedly in preparation for an attack. Why would they be attacking? Well, now we know that Finland and Sweden wanted, to join NATO. This is all in writing, published, copyrighted, decades before these events have taken place. Even in these documents, they talk about how Switzerland will lose its neutrality at this time and get involved in things because of these military situations. It's happened. It's now fact. So the answer about what do you do, we've said to people that here, of course, you've got to learn to think for yourself and not get caught up in that raging river of irrationality. Prepare. In the FIGU people know how to, and there are other groups that are very good at this, preparation, stocking food and supplies and clothing and water and shelter and means of defense if necessary. If you don't have the means for that now, it can be harder. And of course, to make healthily interdependent relationships with people, whereby you can offer each other mutual assistance and support. Not everybody has to be into Billy Meyer information, because the world is being affected by this. Not just people who follow Billy Meyer or don't, his material. So there are efforts like this, when you have a forum, when you put out a video where people in 3 different countries now can speak about these things and try to create a filament, a way that there's a matrix for the co-creation now of more connections between people who can offer each other, either in information or in tangible goods, a form of healthy support where each person still is responsible for themselves. You don't have to have all the same beliefs, philosophies, or what have you. But for survival, people have to come together in valid ways. Politics doesn't really provide that. Religion doesn't provide that. It's only through the self-responsibility and the core understanding that is in this teaching that people will start to eventually, the survivors will grasp this far more than many people living now.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Christian, for joining us today. It was very, very interesting. It was very.
Thank you both.
Thank both of you.
You're welcome.